So we're going to start with some speed, sort of rapid fire, get to know you questions. Okay. So Orlando first. What was your first car?
K5 Blazer, 1969. Sky blue K5 Blazer.
Awesome. Matt?
Oh, I had a 1994 Acura Integra, and everybody was jealous of that, man.
Very slick. Your first job, Matt?
I bagged groceries at a Rothside GA. I'm from Kaiser, if the Salem's neighbor to the north, and the green bow tie service and all that. So,
Awesome. Orlando?
I was a bus washer for TriMet.
Interesting. Very cool. I'm going to add a new one. I shared some of these questions with Matt and Orlando, but of course I changed it up, so we'll see what happens. Your most atypical or unusual job that you've ever had. What comes to your mind? So, Matt, I'll put you on the spot first.
that's a good one. Oh, okay. So, we were all at U of O, and a lot of times couldn't find work. So I don't know if you remember Select Temp. You would go to them when you couldn't find work, and they put me in a whole variety of things, from clearing highway hillsides for the City of Eugene Parks and Rec. But then there was a manufacturer of plastic tubes in deep East Eugene, and I was the guy that mixed up the resin in the bucket and probably should have wore a mask and goggles and did not.
Very atypical. Orlando?
I don't know if I can top that, but
It was like 2 weeks. I think I'm fine.
Think.
oh wow. Gosh, I think mine's very uninspiring or unexciting. But I was a camp counselor for outdoor school, and it was kind of unique being out there in the wilderness with kids, and they didn't know my real name.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, the Globetrotters, I guess, that's atypical. You don't
That's
expect to
not
grow up
normal.
in.
How many
big
Globetrotters in the room?
Right. Yes, again, a good follow-up question once we go mingling. What's your not-to-be-missed either TV show or TV series these days? Orlando.
For me?
Yeah.
Okay. Billions. Love the show.
Okay.
Love the show.
Matt?
Giamatti, can't beat him. Yeah, that's a nice, serious one. I mean, I really like Silicon Valley because it's kind of got that startup vibe and it's hilarious. Veep is just the most unbelievably crude and anti-PC thing, which is fun to watch every once in a while. And I think the best thing that I've seen in the last decade maybe was the first season of True Detective with McConaughey and Harrelson. If you haven't seen that, it's a treat.
Interesting. Awesome. The first concert you've ever attended?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Classic.
I saw Fish at the Portland Meadows.
Very classic. Your drink of choice? Orlando.
Dare
Careful,
I say anything
careful.
else? Yeah.
This is a safe space. We're among family.
Boring. It's water.
Good stuff.
Water.
Depending where you are. Yeah. I really like tea and kombucha. I don't know about you guys. But then, I mean, I drink. I'm a liquids guy, and I have 3 kids, so I make a pot of coffee in the morning. I'm not ashamed to say that. What's your favorite alcoholic beverage?
I am actually non-alcoholic.
Completely.
I made it through the University of Oregon, all of the fun soirees without a drink. So
Way to go, man.
to this day.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right. What activity do you do? We know you're both crazy busy, but what activity do you do for yourself to take care of yourself?
I'll go first. I took up boxing on the side because it's an amazing workout, first of all, but then it turns out it's kind of fun to hit stuff. It can be therapeutic, and really, I think you should all try it.
Cool.
Yoga. Yoga helps me stay centered, keeps me flexible, and I still like to play from time to time. So yoga helps me actually stay on the court with the young guys.
Awesome. Shifting a little bit more towards the U of O, where did you live either on campus or around campus? Orlando.
18th and Mill. I remember that place. It was interesting. It was close enough to walk, but yet far enough to where I felt a little independence at the U of O.
My buddies and I had a house on 19th and Emerald, I think it was. Emerald, Onyx, one of those precious stones.
Most of those buildings are still there. We're building a lot
Ours
on
is
campus.
not there anymore.
Awesome. So again, some fun get-to-know-you questions. So shifting a little bit more towards just sort of what you do, the Duck Career Network is very much about facilitating the Ducks Help Ducks for career success spirit. And so encouraging people to share advice, offer advice, ask for advice. So that's sort of the spirit of these questions. So at this point, we are familiar with Modus Recruiting and Staffing, Townsend Tea, Brew Dr. Kombucha. But can you tell us a little bit more about just, from your perspective, leading these organizations, what are they like? And also what fills your day? What do CEOs, do in your particular role? So maybe, Orlando, do you want to kick it off?
Absolutely. So what I found, and it's the evolution. So my firm is a true startup from kind of ground zero. And the evolution, I think, really describes what I do, is the best descriptive of what I do today. So starting when it's a one-person shop and you're the only individual in the office, to having hundreds of employees. The transition has gone from being chief technology officer, chief financial officer, chief marketing officer, attorney, counselor, to now being chief problem solver. I really feel like my days are full of strategy and problem resolution, strategic interaction with customers, and generally I get to start my workday at about 8 p.m. And so that's when I actually get my work done. So I really feel like my day is primarily resolution, strategy, and helping other individuals be the best that they can be.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think like Orlando, I was employee number one. It is a great way to become CEO. Just start your own company of a one-person organization. But I was like, chief barista and chief janitor, and I didn't get to the cool titles until later. We're my company. We're a beverage manufacturer. We make about 700,000 bottles a week of kombucha. So that's the biggest part of our business. It's literally just brewing and bottling and running a brewery. We're the third largest brewery in Oregon, behind Deschutes and Widmer. And so that's a big part of what we do, and that's where I spend a lot of my time still, is to make sure we're driving forward with continuous improvement in manufacturing. I also, kind of invented the brand and the culture and the ethos behind all of it, so I still work with the marketing team on driving any kind of innovation. I still write the copy for a lot of kind of what goes on the bottle. And those are the two areas that I'm really passionate about, is the product and how we talk about the product. And as a CEO, which we're always going to be learning how to be a CEO, driving the strategic planning process, and then out of that, setting initiatives and goals for each part of the organization and each of my leadership team, and then overseeing directly the VPs and communicating with the board of directors is a big part of what I do, and we have a weekly cadence of updates, a monthly kind of MD&A and financial review, and then quarterly actual board meeting when things are approved and whatnot. And if all's going well, that's all very smooth, but it's never always very smooth. So we do a lot. I think it's still, early on, I was the janitor and the barista, and I was, the bookkeeper, and I was the HR guy. I'm still kind of having to wear a whole bunch of hats, but they are cooler hats. I like them. Yeah.
And along those same lines, the question I had was, how has your role changed over time as your organizations have grown? So Matt, you alluded to that a little bit, but I think in particular when it was more just on your shoulders, but then as it's grown, I guess in particular, how have you infused your spirit into the culture of your organizations? How has your role changed, and how has the organization changed over time too? So maybe Orlando, if you want to start.
Sure. Well, I think the evolution has been pretty dynamic for me in establishing corporate values and making sure that those corporate values reflect both my personal values, but also what our industry needs as a whole. You look around the industry and you begin to observe where the gaps are, where the deficiencies are, and where you can fill that in. So establishing the corporate values and then driving the organization to those values and being a value-centric organization has been key. And from there, developing the leadership team. So I feel like as a CEO, my primary objective is to make sure that the individuals that I work with on a day-to-day basis that are my leaders not only reflect the values, but are also capable and willing participants in the development of the organization from a value proposition. So my role has changed dramatically in that sense. As you alluded to, once you go from wearing all of those hats, you then have to become chief strategist for all of those areas. So if I'm meeting with our CFO, inevitably CFOs can be very centered on metrics and numbers, for example. And as I provide direction, the direction then has to include the other aspects, the operational aspects of the organization to help it move forward based on those values. So for my primary objective right now is to make sure that every person on my team, on my leadership team, understands who we are, who we want to be, what our five-year strategic plan is, and that they're taking the necessary steps to accomplish those goals. And sometimes you have to course correct. I spend time meeting with those individuals, reevaluating the goals. We're nimble, so sometimes goals can be dynamic and they can change based on the market conditions. So I find myself very much involved in value-driven strategic meetings and leadership and guidance and direction for the organization and the individuals that lead it.
Thank you. Awesome. Matt?
Yeah, I think as a company grows, it's very hard to keep communicating, to just have that natural culture that you had when you were small, right? And we've always had a very positive and fun culture. We love the products we make and the experiences we provide for our guests at the tea houses. But then, as I'm less and less available to each little part of the organization, if there's not if the leadership and the team at that part of the organization isn't inspired or regularly by kind of some cultural message or reminder, it can get bad, right? So I think the work of a CEO especially a founder CEO in an organization that grows to 300-400 plus employees is to continue to move around and be visible and communicate out where the company is going, all the way to the tip of the spear, right? To the bottling line, to the field marketing team, to the people working at the tea houses, because they need reminders of what the mission and the vision is and why they're there. When you're small and everyone's working with the founder and the founder has that clear vision of what they're trying to do and why it's special, it comes easy. And so that's something you have to learn over time is that you can't ignore that part of it, and you pay the price if you do. And we've certainly made that mistake, and it's something that you always have to work on and get better at. And I try to hold myself to a high standard of, and it's still very difficult. I still get members of the team that come to me and say, this part of the group just feels like they're on an island, and that's the last thing you want to hear, is that some part of your organization feels left out or not taking part in the success. So learning to communicate that out has been vital.
Hey, can I add? I think that was excellent, because one of the things that I've recognized, depending on the structure of your organization or depending on maybe just the geography, your role in the C-suite as the CEO can be dramatically different. So I work with a lot of roundtables with other CEOs, and many of them are large employers here in Oregon, thousands of employees. And it's always fascinating to me when I go and I visit their offices, and they actually have, we're talking about the C-suite, but there's the C-suite, so it's a separate floor. Oftentimes it's secured, and you cannot simply, as an employee, walk into the office of the CEO and have a conversation. And the transformation that happens oftentimes, because I have an open door policy, and we're a very collaborative environment, and anyone at any given time can walk into my office. Preferably, they would check in with my assistant, but that often doesn't happen. It's like, hey, do you have a minute? And those minutes add up. But it's fascinating to watch that dynamic, to make yourself to go from being readily available at any given time to then be more stratified in your organization, and you're not as available. And so balancing how you interact with the voices on your team so you know what's happening within your organization versus being strategic and making sure that the initiatives are moving forward can be a very difficult balance, because a lot of organizations at the top lose sight of what's happening within their organizations. And often in this environment, in our current society, that can be catastrophic for organizations when you don't know what's happening in all of those different facets. So it's interesting when you were describing that in different locations, you have to figure out a way to make sure that your communication, your lines of communication are constantly open and that they're clear so that you can drive those initiatives. Otherwise, individuals do feel like they're not part of the organization, and that's when you have maybe issues that happen that you really don't want in your organization at all.
And actually, one thing that has worked for us, because we were looking for a way to kind of cement our values as we grew, so that everyone would readily know kind of what they were. You can't, put your values and your mission statement up on the wall of everybody's where they work. It just doesn't. It would seem weird. So we went through B Corp certification, and so if you're aware of what B Corps are, you're not focused just on the single bottom line of profit, but you kind of have a triple bottom line of your people, the planet, and profit. By putting B Corp certification on everything we do, it gives us a way to just use a badge to communicate those values, and we educate our team internally on what it means to be a B Corp. And when we were going through the certification process and we needed to kind of make improvements in order to gain certification, we sent it out to everybody of the areas we needed to work on and who would like to be on a small team that would strategize on how we could improve. And that really looped everybody into the effort. So finding something, even if B Corp's not the thing, that everybody can work on that is a part of cementing your values has been great for us.
It's interesting, and I think maybe one of the reasons why we could probably have this just as a singular topic is because the individuals that work within an organization obviously are the value. They bring the culture and the organization to life, and they're so important. And the way that we engage it, and I really feel passionate about this, is why I want to keep talking about it. But once we established our values and we went through an exercise, we did a company-wide retreat, and everyone participated in the value creation process. Then we took that process and we began to solidify it. And so this was our first annual values recognition, actually yesterday. And what we did is back in 2018, we established a Values Award with our organization. And the Values Award, we have 12. And the Values Award was given to the individual or individuals who exemplified all 12 values. And the Values Award recipient, we wanted to then attach it to something that actually represented what we thought of the values. So what we attached to it was a trip anywhere. So the trip anywhere became kind of the kind of running conversation throughout the entire organization. If you win, where are you going to go? You can go anywhere. And so we awarded actually 2 individuals, and we take it very seriously. The process to develop and identify who the winner is well thought out. It's voted on by your peers, by your customers, by clients. And so the ability to actually ingratiate your team into what you're trying to accomplish in the organization, I think becomes an essential part of leading any organization. And the reason why I say this is because in a society right now where bravado and egoism is really the order of the day, you have to figure out a way to actually bring people closer to you in a way that's positive and re-energizing. So it's oftentimes something that's overlooked, but it is incredibly important.
Wonderful insight. Thank you. Orlando, you mentioned that you're part of some CEO roundtables, and so that sort of wants me to go in a slightly different direction. But as I mentioned, networking, mentoring, super important, just for personal development, professional development. Can you each share how you keep your networks alive, and also who do you seek for mentorship, insight, sounding board, sort of a scream room, whatever. So whoever is interested in jumping in first.
Sure, I'll take it. Early on when I was starting the company, we really didn't have anybody. I mean, there was no board, no advisors. Mom and my dad, maybe, right? When I started the first part of the business, but in 2015, I recognized that we were to a level when I really needed to start professionalize kind of our effort, and then also look to people who had avoided the pitfalls or fallen victim to them, so I could learn from those from that expertise. And so I built my first board of directors in the middle of 2015, and that's always been very positive for me. We've had a little bit of an ebb and flow in terms of members, trying to constantly look for people who can add value. But just keeping that weekly cadence with them and really relying on them to add value in terms of considering the B Corp certification, compensation, strategy. They've really helped us avoid what could have been some really terrible decisions that my entrepreneurial optimism would have taken us down a path that would not have worked out. It turns out. So my board of directors is who I turn to. I also joined YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, and that's been good. It's been about a year and a half, and it's about 80 people in the organization here in Oregon, but it's a global organization, and it gives you opportunities to get exposed to some continuous learning opportunities. I just was in Chicago at the University of Chicago Booth School, learning from the people that wrote our textbooks when we were in business school. So Stephen Kaplan was there teaching a course, and I was in the front row. And that was really cool. And it can be very affirming when you're taking the class, and they're not saying things you don't understand. Like, oh yeah, I get that. So opportunities like building a network and the chance to continue to learn.
Yeah, so my approach is really unorthodox. On how that circle of influence. There's an old saying that I use in my networking kind of world, and it's show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And if you've heard that before, you understand that your circle of influence really helps determine your trajectory and where you want to go. And so my unorthodox approach was, when I started the business, very much the same. Didn't have anyone, just friends and family. Quickly realized that they weren't going to be the sounding board that I needed. But I found that I began looking for at least one truth teller in my circle. Someone who I respected, who had accomplished enough that even when I maybe didn't want to respect them, I had to respect what they had accomplished. So that individual I found as my truth teller. And I keep the similar cadence with my truth teller. My truth teller is the person that I can be absolutely transparent with. I can tell every thought, every idea, every concept, every emotion, and that individual gives wise counsel based on their experience, based on what I'm saying, and based on what I'm trying to accomplish. They know all of my goals, they know my fears, they know my weaknesses, and that individual is invaluable, I think, for any leader. And maybe if we had more truth tellers, we might have a little bit more. Well, okay, that's a different topic. But so that was my unorthodox approach, and I found someone that I respect and that I value. The other side of that is the roundtables with the CEOs. So I looked at the Oregon or the Pacific Northwest landscape, and I picked 3 CEOs that I felt exemplified what it meant to be a really profound leader. And those CEOs are individuals that I meet with regularly in a roundtable, and we talk about issues that are challenging Oregon. And these 3 individuals, I don't often reference them by name because they run publicly traded companies, and we have what we call the safe room. And that safe room allows us to say things that they may not want to be publicized, but they are incredibly valuable. So we talk about things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and its impact on organizations, and deficiencies and weaknesses and fears. We talk about financial results and how that impacts their decision making. We talk about their own personal families. And so we have that discussion. And so it's unorthodox, but wow, is it rewarding and profound. So I would encourage everyone, find that truth teller, that individual that you can count on to tell you the truth, someone that you can trust with your deepest and darkest secrets and fears, and then find a group of individuals that you aspire to, that you can actually give and take equally. That for me has been kind of the approach that I've taken to having, the board and the individuals, because oftentimes what I found when I work with boards and general counsel and things like that, it's hard because oftentimes those individuals have an agenda. It doesn't mean that their agenda is bad. It just means that they have one. And I tend to look towards the individuals who don't have an agenda, who have nothing to gain or lose by telling me the truth.
Great advice, fantastic. I'm watching time, so I want to make sure we, are able to fit in as much as possible. But versus asking a question, I'm just going to throw out some facts, just because I think it's neat, and hopefully you can all ask them about this later on. When about 3 weeks ago, Orlando, Matt, and Carrie and Megan and I had lunch. We just learned, we had, I think, a fantastic time and learned so much. But I wanted to share that with Matt. The whole Townsend T concept came from a business school project, so I just think that's totally cool. Something that, oh yeah, you had to do it for your credit, but suddenly you build not only a life, but a brand and culture. That's amazing. And the fact that I wanted to share about Orlando is because some of us were wondering, student athletes recruiting, how does that work? And Orlando shared how when he was a student athlete, he recruited other student athletes. And he was able to parlay that experience into staffing and recruiting. I think that's totally cool. So again, things that you can talk to them about in between, coffee and more munchies. But the last thing I think I wanted to ask, and again, I'm just kind of playing it by time. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'll open up for 2 questions, burning questions, and then, like I said, I would love for all of you to participate in that 60-person quick introduction exercise of mine. But again, I think it'll be fun, and I think you'll also be impressed by who's in the room. I already know, by the way, most of you should have seen the RSVP list, but I love the fact that we have some recent grads who are going to hopefully be thoroughly inspired by the comments today, but we also have some organizational presidents. We run the whole gamut, and that's, again, another reason I love this event, because it's not just for one category, one major, one industry. Every duck is welcome. So if you have a burning question, could you please raise your hand, and I'll pass you the mic. Is everyone? Oh, TJ, let me pass this. By the way, we are being recorded, so because not everyone could attend this. Oh, no pressure, TJ, sorry. But, the Q&A is probably what we use. But anyway, here's the mic.
This is a question for both of you guys. What daily routine do you guys have? And if you go in depth with that. Morning and night, if there's a difference.
Well, I'm committed to my family. I have 3 sons, ages 10, 8, and 5, and so any exercise that I have in my life is basically before they wake up, right? So if I'm gonna get a workout or a run in, it's a 5:30 or 6 a.m. And then I'm there to help them get off to school, right? I'm the breakfast. I'm the morning guy. My wife is not a super morning person, so I take care of breakfast and help them make their lunches and get them off to school. My wife takes them to school, and then I hustle as quickly as I can to get off to work. So in the office by 8:30-ish every day, and in the office means, it could mean anything. It could mean going to the brewery to be visible there and take part in tasting panel. That's a big thing where I want to stay tied to the liquid and the quality, and so I'm just part of that group that makes sure that we're tasting the kombucha each week and that every batch is as expected. Or it means that I'm going into our head office and working with the marketing team or the leadership team. Or it could mean that I'm going off to one of the tea houses. I don't travel a whole lot. I try to avoid it if possible. I'll go to very big buyer meetings, so like Whole Foods Global or a big Kroger or Safeway meeting. And then I do some speaking engagements at the behest of our PR firm and our VP of marketing. Get you out there. I have a Wikipedia page. Oh man. But then, and I'm also committed to being home for dinner. So I get home around 5:30 or 6, and dinner with the family every night at the table. Trying to set a good example for these 3 boys that I'm raising. And I coach t-ball, so I'm still a very, normal, I guess, dad in that respect. And then, like Orlando said, I think he's got a little bit worse, but I do have to bang out some emails, in the evening hours, and sometimes you end up staying up very late if you're working on something in particular. But I try to avoid work on the weekends.
So my routine is very consistent. The cadence is regular. I start every day with prayer. I'm a very spiritual person, so every day is, and I'm kind of one of those I'm a prayer. So I don't thank you and move on. I spend 10, 15 minutes going through just a conversation, and for me that centers me. It helps me plan my day. The second thing that I do is I make sure that I read something early, because I want to jumpstart, and this may sound odd, maybe I need it, but I want to jumpstart my cerebral aspects of the day. And I try to do that because the moment I walk in the office, inevitably there will be someone to meet me at my door with something. So I don't want that to be the first thing that challenges my intellect. So I read something. Whether it's something on our industry or a book that I'm reading. I'm notorious. I read 4 books at a time. I have 4 that I'm reading right now. I can't help it. Someone will recommend a book, and I'll say, that sounds great, and I'll start it. So I read, and then from there, throughout the day is kind of the normal course. I try not to open my email the first thing that I do when I get in the office, because once you open your email, you can actually get kind of pulled in and sucked into the email vortex. So I try to address the things that are going on with the day, greet the staff, talk, find out what's happening, if I've missed anything, because I do take my kids to school in the morning, and I pick them up in the evening. So I have 3 athletes, and they play 3 sports each. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's track, it's basketball, it's soccer, and I have to make sure that I touch every single one of them. And they're actually pretty good. I won't tell them that. Oh, we're being recorded. Darn. So that's typically my cadence. That's kind of a snapshot of what it looks like.
Good morning. I'm Will Moore. You've both referenced the value of your employees in your companies. Do you have a method, or what method do you use to get a reliable sense of to what extent your employees are engaged in the company and how many of them are engaged in your company?
Wow. That is an outstanding question. I'll answer it like this, and I'll be a little controversial. So, as our company has grown, we went through a significant transformation between 2017 and 2018. We grew a lot, and I mean that both financially and operationally. I turned over 85% of my team during that process. And I equate it to, and I know you'll appreciate this, I equate it to, we were maybe a Division II player, forgive my sports analogy here. We were a Division II player. We were really good. We were maybe the equivalent of the national champions of Division II. But the organization made the decision to play Division I. And so when we made that decision, we needed to find out who was willing, capable, and desired to actually make that transition with us, because it meant a different set of skills, different effort, and a different mindset. Well, I found that some of the individuals that were willing were not capable, and some of the individuals that were capable were not willing. And so when we made that transition, I realized throughout that process of change, and this is that would be the anchor, throughout the process of change and improvement, I found out who was really for the organization and moving forward and who wasn't. And so we did make the transition to Division I, and we've expanded and we've become more complex. We've become more sophisticated in our approach. And that let me know that change is the catalyst, that is the great exposer or identifier of who is truly engaged. The moment you implement something new in your organization that is designed for the good of all, I don't mean change that's meant to maybe weed people out. I mean change that really is designed to move your organization forward, that is going to be a gift to every person involved. The individuals who are not engaged in that change process, whether they just are resistant to change or just don't do well with change, whatever the reason, that's how I determine whether or not an individual is engaged. If they are able to embrace the change because they recognize what it means for everyone, not just themselves.
That's a really good point about change, right? Because as we grow these companies very quickly, we go through a lot of change. And yeah, I've had employees that I thought would be lifers, right? That when we were having to get to this new normal, they couldn't get comfortable with it, right? And they definitely disengaged. I think that people show themselves, and I rely on the leaders of all my teams to recognize who is showing that they're disengaged, and we try to engage everyone, just like with the B Corp certification, right? But it comes to a point where, you know, the old Jack Welch, fire the bottom 10%, right? You just have to, for the good of the company, you know, get rid of the people who are coming with problems with no solutions, who are blaming other people for their lack of success. You know, it's still business, right? And that takes a very high emotional intelligence, and I think that's one of the most important things we look for as we consider elevating people through the organization. Who are the people who are showing positivity and always looking for how we can continuously improve, who want to lead people, who actually, when they're given a chance to lead something, they do it very enthusiastically, very well, very measurable. And so I think that emotional intelligence is something that you get better and better at recognizing how it's exhibited in your organization.
Fantastic.